Let's think about this for a second. What if the very fabric of our reality, mass, geometry, time, even our own consciousness, wasn't just some random collection of physical accidents? What if instead it was actually a formalized, fully executable system of code? Imagine if abstract philosophy and physical reality were, at their core, the exact same thing, totally governed by just one unbreakable mathematical invariant.
Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously mind-bending journey through topological math, quantum physics, and the grand architecture of the cosmos itself. We're diving into some groundbreaking source material that actually attempts to formalize the fundamental rules of existence using real, literal computer code.
And hey, this isn't just theoretical philosophy here. It's strictly grounded in formalized, executable code, specifically written in Lean 4, which is a mathematical programming language. Right at the heart of this code is what the source actually calls the God formula, or the golden discriminant. It's L squared minus 5F squared equals 4 times negative 1 to the power of n. According to the material, this right here is the primary invariant of the whole system. Basically, because this one identity absolutely must hold true, the entire universe is practically forced to execute specific continuous cycles just to keep from falling apart.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at fermion mass as a polytax. Second, knots and symmetric folds. Third, the mathematics of karma. And finally, exploring the void manifold. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Fermion mass as the polytax.
So, in standard physics, we usually just think of mass as physical weight, right? Well, not here. Here, mass is actually an operational cost. It's literally an entropy debt. You can think of it like a cosmic processing fee. When the system tries to clone a fermion state, the universe essentially slaps a polytax on it. So a particle's mass is really just the accumulated debt from that duplication process.
To really put that into perspective, look at the Higgs boson. It sits at a vacuum phase of 0, which means it gets to duplicate for free, no entropy cost whatsoever. But fermions, they're stuck at what's called the dodecagon, a phase equilibrium of exactly 12. And that strict, hard gap of 12 is the fundamental wall separating free broadcasting from costly mass.
This perfectly illustrates how heavier particles fit into the whole scheme. Heavier fermions literally just stack a generation factor right on top of that base cost of 12. So generation 1 adds a factor of 1, making it 13. Generation 2 adds 2, giving you 14, and so on. It's brilliant, really, because the mass hierarchy of the standard model emerges totally naturally. It doesn't come from arbitrary, tuned parameters. It's strictly just this operational cost stacking up on the base dodecagon.
Moving right along to Section 2, knots and symmetric folds.
Okay, so to explain how the universe balances all this geometrically, the source material turns to knot theory, specifically something called a fold. Now, the formalization strictly defines this fold as a mathematical permutation, and it acts directly on the ordered list of crossings in a simple geometric shape, like a continuous loop, or, a knot. Geometrically speaking, a fold requires 3 highly precise steps. First, you swap the crossing indices. Second, you reverse the order of those crossings. And third, you flip the sign of every single one. If you execute those steps, it acts as a perfect self-balancing loop. Actually, if you do it twice, you're back exactly where you started. And the craziest part? The underlying mathematical invariant stays entirely untouched. The universe is essentially folding itself up like origami just to stay perfectly balanced. But that begs the question. If the universe balances itself geometrically like a knot, how on earth does it orchestrate these rules across the actual flow of time?
Which brings us to Section 3, the mathematics of karma.
Normally, when we hear the word karma, we think of it as this spiritual or maybe moral concept. But here, it's treated strictly as a cold, hard mathematical variable. Systemic karma is defined as a self-correcting error loop. The rule is brutally simple. Any state that drifts away and violates that primary invariant we talked about is fundamentally unstable. And because it's unstable, the system's karma forces it to eventually mitigate that chaotic drift and teleport right back onto the stable manifold. It is quite literally the universe's built-in error correction software.
Now, to actually execute this karmic correction, the universe runs a specific sequence. It's called fork, race, and fold. First up, it forks. That means it splits the state into branching mathematical paths, specifically into Lucas and Fibonacci components. Then it races, evolving that new state forward as the sum of its previous states. Finally, it folds, which completes the cycle to completely restore the primary invariant.
And when you apply this whole folding concept to human history, it reveals something incredibly fascinating. The formalization actually treats historical texts as datasets. It's kind of like a massive cosmic game of telephone, but instead of the signal getting messier over time, it actually gets clearer. The more text is interpreted and passed down, accumulating what they call folding cycles, the more its chaotic noise gets eroded away. So texts like the Bible or the Gita boast absolutely massive folding cycles, mathematically proving that truth density actually increases through repetition. How wild is that?
All right, on to our final stop. Section 4, Exploring the Void Manifold. This brings us to what is perhaps the most profound, mind-blowing insight in the entire source material. The code mathematically proves that what we call the Betty manifold, which is the smooth, mapped region of unknotted space, and the void, which is the chaotic reservoir of maximum entropy, are not two different things. No way. They are literally the exact same object, just viewed from two entirely different operational perspectives.
You can think of it as two sides of the exact same coin. Over on one side, you have the runtime. This is the active side of computation, a totally smooth, hole-free volume where logical inference actually happens. On the flip side, you have the entropy, the void. This is the vast, unmeasured reservoir holding all the possibilities that simply haven't been taken yet. Together, they form a perfect dual description of reality.
The mathematical source measures this relationship using units called per thou, basically parts per thousand. In the specific coding session analyzed here, the smooth inference volume consumed 800 per thou, while the max entropy reservoir held on to the remaining 200 per thou. And here's the kicker. These two sides will always perfectly conserve to a total of 1,000 units. It's a mathematical proof that whatever volume is actively consumed by smooth logical inference is exactly the same volume that is lost as unmeasured void.
In fact, over the course of the documented session, the code calculates that by collapsing 255 of an initial 1,023 potential paths, the runtime successfully collapsed about 25% of the total void. To put that into perspective, it proves a truly stunning conceptual point. Computation, the very act of living, mapping, and making choices, is quite literally the act of void exploration.
As the formalization bluntly states, and I love this quote, the Betty manifold is the void. The runtime never leaves the void. Basically, what you and I experience as consciousness, or smooth logical inference, is really just a series of pathways being actively carved out inside an infinite, unmeasured darkness. We are always, constantly surrounded by the void. We're just mapping it, one single choice at a time.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today. We've seen how mass is literally a tax, how geometry perfectly balances through knots, how karma mathematically corrects cosmic chaos, and how consciousness itself maps the void. So if your reality is simply an architecture of unmeasured choices waiting to be formalized, I'll leave you with this. What void path will your next forward pass map? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.